talking about solar return charts or solar revolutions, as they sometimes call them. I saw this solar revolution term in the older books that I looked at. For today, I've only been looking in two books that I've got. Maybe if you have any others that you can suggest, you can write them in the chat box or just show them, whatever. But I've got two books. One is pretty old, and it's a guy called Ronald Davison. I don't know if you have heard of him. And this is the book called Cycles of Destiny, and he's talking about return charts, not just solar return, but also lunar return and many other types of returns. This book is more about prediction because it uses some of this older language of malefics and benefics, and he's also giving interpretation about what can really turn out as events in a particular year based on positions in the solar return chart, which I'm not a very big fan of. I don't really like this approach because it's very difficult to connect real events with the chart, even though they can be. The problem is that when we read this, when I read that description, say for example for marriage, illness, accidents, things like that, he's giving like different positions of the solar return chart that can be found, and we can become too bogged into it, like or bereavement he's even talking about. So I don't recommend it because you can really start thinking about, oh, I have this in my chart, could that happen? Which is, yeah, you see, it's quite tricky to play with this. So the other book I wanted to show you is that one. Do you have it? Do you know it? So Planets in Solar Return by a lady called Mary Fortier Shia. It's like a cookbook for the different positions of things in the solar return chart. There is a very interesting introduction from which I learned a lot of general things about solar returns. So yeah, you can try it out. I've got it on my Kindle. And any other books you can recommend? Anything else that you have?
I don't know.
No? Okay, no problem. Well, basically, the solar return chart, or the chart of the exact time when the sun comes back to the same position on the sky in the zodiac by degree every year. This is the solar return chart. This doesn't always correspond, as you know, with the actual birthday. Sometimes it's one day before, it could be one day after. In certain leap years, it can even fall behind or forward with a couple of days. So I know that situation. It's exactly one day, even to the hour, earlier for me this year. So I'm supposed to have my solar return tomorrow, but the birthday on Saturday, which is a little interesting. And this can happen. So we're looking at the path of the sun, and when the sun comes back, we construct the chart of that moment. And this is supposed to give us information of what we can expect from the next year, from that birthday to the next birthday. And it is one of the most commonly used and easiest to use prediction techniques in astrology. Even if we're not very concentrated on predicting any particular thing that will happen to us, it can give us, I think, a very good idea about how we are going to be feeling about certain things in our lives in the year to come and what the areas of concentration of activity will be. Because ultimately, the signs are not as important as the houses in the solar return chart. So it's more important to look at where everything falls by house than the other way around. And in general, we use the same ideas, the same methods and logic to interpret the solar return chart as we do a normal chart. So if you are practicing general chart interpretation, that is the same thing. But we just have to have in mind that this is more short term, and it's not something that is like an overreaching theme of our whole lifetime, but it's more of the wavelength at which we are at this particular year. And the solar return chart is not always as important as in other, so in certain years it's more important than in others. For example, I was very surprised and interested, again, this is an interesting synchronicity for me, to learn that every 33 years, so if you're turning 33 or 66, for example, or 99, The angles of the chart on the solar return will coincide pretty much exactly with your birth ones. But this is if you are sticking to your birthplace. So because on astro.com, everything was set by default on my side when I was checking my chart, and I didn't realize that it was set for the birthplace. So I calculated my solar return for this year, and I was like staring at it for 5 minutes to see if there is a mistake, because everything was exactly the same. So the ascendant was not just in Taurus as it is in my personal natal chart, but it was in the same degree of Taurus. Same for the MC, the IC, and the descendant. So complete repetition of positions of that. And turns out that was correct. And that was because I calculated it for Bulgaria, where I was born, and because I'm turning 33 this year. So that's an exceptional scenario. This only happens at those 33 number years. And then I realized that this is actually not my proper solar return for the year, because I'm not going to be spending my birthday in Bulgaria. And I heard that people move, they go on holidays, or they go on what they call solar return holidays, to change the location of their solar return for that particular year, so they get a different chart. Because when you move through the time zones, and especially if you move far away from the place where you were born, you can get a very different chart in terms of the houses. So you're going to get a different ascendant, most likely, or the degree of the ascendant is going to move, and all of the angles of the chart will move. And then that can result in the sun, the most important factor in the solar return, because we're following the sun. The sun is the one that comes back to the same place. It will be falling maybe in a different house. So it's a little funny to me to try to engineer your solar return and to escape from certain positions and to try to kind of get a different position. But obviously, some people do that. And I will show you my case in a minute, not because I want you guys to concentrate too much on my chart, but because I happen to have this interesting situation of residing in 3 different places, pretty much. And I've got 3 different solar return charts that show different. I mean, I thought this would be a good example of that relocation thing. So my proper solar return chart is supposed to be for Spain, for Valencia, and that gives a different ascendant, different angles, different concentrations from the one in Bulgaria and the one in London. So you'll see in a minute. But a few general things before that about solar return charts. I have a couple of slides or things to show you here. So a couple of quotes, basically. This is from Ronald Davison. He says, however promising or threatening the configurations in the solar revolution or the solar return, it should always be remembered that nothing can come to pass that is not shown in the nativity or the natal chart. So that is to say that the solar return chart becomes very important, or the more important it is, the more similar themes it accentuates than we already can find in our natal chart. And nothing will be just appearing as a new theme. So for example, if you've got nothing in Cancer, but you have it as a pronounced sign in the solar return, that would not automatically turn you into someone with this energy. But it will be more of a variation for that particular year. So the more we have repeated topics or aspects that are overlapping, for example, like I've got this year, the overlapping of the angles of the chart between the natal and the solar return. This is supposed to be an important year, an eventful and fateful year. And also, if you have all sorts of aspects of solar return planets touching natal planets or the other way around, and if you have, say, a stellium of planets in the house by birth, and this house receives a transit, so-called transit by the solar return planets, and many other combinations, planets on cusps, for example, on both sides, and things like this. So we can touch on this as we go forward with the examples later on. And then the other one I wanted to show you was from the other book. And it says that the solar return is a better predictor of psychological changes and internal growth than it is of actual physical events. So, yeah, ultimately, we are adjusting ourselves every year for the next in a particular way, and we are feeling in a different way. There are new goal sets, and a concentration, the sun being placed in another house, is showing us what sort of area of life will be dictating the theme of the year. So, this is all counting to psychological and inner changes in us then can be translated into real happenings and real events eventually that we instigate. But it's not that much about the events themselves. They can be so many and so different, as we know. All right, so the example, I will jump quickly into this, so then we can go to other examples. But
Madalena, can I just ask, if you don't have an accurate birth time, that's, I mean, how would you work that? Because it's going to throw the houses out and it's not going to, so is it worth doing? I mean, I know you could still use any aspects presumably that come up with it, but how would you view that?
Well, I would view it as a birth chart with not an accurate time. So I will ignore the angles pretty much. And as you said, I would look at the aspects because it will be very important what aspects the sun makes.
Yeah, so that's really all you can look at, isn't it?
Yeah, well, also the aspects of the moon and the other planets.
Yeah.
For example, let's say I'm going to have Mars retrograde because Mars is currently retrograde and it will be still in a few days' time when I got my birthday. So this year, Mars will be retrograde in the solar return chart. And that's important. That on its own is important, regardless of the fact that you don't know what house it may be in. So yes, unfortunately, we're limited if we don't have the time. The same way as we're limited with a person's chart that doesn't know the time. But yeah, still it can be helpful. I think it's still helpful.
Okay.
Basically, the positions in signs of the slow planets can almost be completely ignored because they don't move very much, and they also if they're retrograde or if they're not retrograde can be ignored in the solar return. As if you have, say, Saturn retrograde, you know how the slow planets spend half of the year in retrograde motion and half of the year not in retrograde motion. So it's very likely that during the year they would move forwards and backwards and they would change their position. So it's more important to register if Mercury, Venus, and Mars are retrograde. That would be significant in that year. Yeah. But otherwise, really the houses are the ones that determine the situations that we would be involved in that year more than anything else. And aspects to the ascendant, aspects to the angles, especially when planets are on an angle or revolving around that or opposing an angle. These are the main factors basically that we need to watch out for. So here it's easier, I think, if we look at charts, if we look at an example. And this is let me see what I'm showing you. Okay, this is my solar return chart for this year at my birthplace. And this is basically not really the one I'm meant to be following and meant to be looking at, but presumably if I travel during the year, at least I don't think this is the rule, but that's the way I interpret it, that if I go to Bulgaria this year, I would be under the influence of these configurations more than the other ones I'm going to show you. So this is actually my exact cross of incarnation, which means angles, exact descendant, NC, and IC the way they are in the birth chart, which is a bit strange, but that's what it is. The sun is in the 6th house in that solar return, and my birth one is also in the 6th house, along with many other planets, but everything else varies. And what is interesting about this chart is that it's got something very pronounced going on around the MC. Many planets are revolving around the MC, they're there, especially Saturn and the Moon. And you know how the 10th house is among other things related to work and career and so on. The 10th house is one of the parental houses. So this makes me a little scared, to be honest, by having exactly Saturn and the Moon, the two parental planets, one connected to the mother, one connected to the father, on the MC. So what I've got coming at the end of the year is a pretty unusual family gathering in Bulgaria. So we never do that, but this year it's something like this planned. And I'm quite concerned because of that solar return chart in Bulgaria, because I expect issues around family dynamic to appear in one way or another. I've got no way to predict exactly how by looking at this, but it seems like it will be inevitable for tension to occur. And you see how all those squares from Mars retrograde in Aries in the 12th house and the Sun in the 6th, all these two are making a lot of squares to the bunch of planets in Capricorn and Aquarius around the MC. And also, we've got this year in December, on the 22nd of December, we've got the every 20 year occurring conjunction of Saturn and Uranus, Saturn and Jupiter, excuse me. And this time it's going to be at 0 degrees Aquarius. So basically that will happen here on the top of my MC. Exactly. So that's interesting to look at in terms of, you've got at the back of your mind the transits, the current transit, and maybe the transits of the slow planets in the duration of that coming year. So you can see how they would activate also your solar return chart, and how you would be part maybe of the big scheme of things happening and get involved in them a bit more than before. The moon will be in the 10th house in Aquarius for me, and it's also probably worth looking at things like the progressions for the year, because they can give us a bit more tips, specific tips about what really can happen as events. Because when I looked at my progressions, I realized my progress moon is also in Aquarius. So this makes the solar return moon this year a bit more important than it would be in other years. So this moon is important because it makes many aspects. It squares the sun, and everything aspecting the sun is important in the solar return. It is conjunct the MC and conjunct Saturn, square Mars. So all of this coming together points out that we can maybe signal out that moon from the rest of the planets in this year. My moon was certainly not that important last year. Yeah. And you can see how things develop if you compare every year with the next. And maybe even going back in time will be more interesting because things have already happened. And as you said, Vero, you can register what year in the past really resonated with the solar return chart. And maybe you discover, if you go deeper into it, that those things that happened in that year that you remember were connected with very prominent planets during the solar return. Yeah. So, okay. That's meant to be the case with me. Just note a few things here, which will change in the next chart. The part of fortune here is at the end of Leo, in the beginning of the 5th house. It's just to register where it is. This is one of the factors which can move a lot if we have a different time of birth or if we're changing the location of the solar return chart. And you see how this now is Valencia, same chart for same year for me, and everything is in the same position in terms of planets in signs, but not in houses. Here I don't have a Taurus ascendant anymore. Mars is not in the 12th house. Mars is now in the 1st house, and the ascendant is in Aries. So that's a very different picture. And Uranus also moved to the 1st house from the 12th. And what we can see here is that the MC is no longer a dominant angle. Everything moved into the, further into the 10th and into the 11th house. Also, none of the angles now has a planet on it, really on it. And most significantly, the sun is in the 7th, not in the 6th. Yeah, so that's very important. In the book, Planets in Solar Returns, that second book that I showed you, the lady explains about those patterns of return of the sun to particular houses in every number of years. So I didn't go too much into the scheme of things to explain it to you, but what I learned as a rule is that when you look at your solar return and you register where is the MC on that year, in my case, say here is in Capricorn. Next year, the MC will move 3 signs ahead. And then the next year, 3 more signs ahead. So I would expect that next year, in my solar return chart, the MC will be in Aries. And then next year will be in Cancer. So it seems to be moving between the cardinal signs, in my case. Yeah. So obviously it depends whose chart we're looking at. In some cases, I guess people spend their life with the MC moving between the fixed signs, others between the mutable signs, and so on. I thought, how interesting is that? So I'm meant to always have a cardinal sign on my MC, it turns out. Anyway, then what else I wanted to show you? So many things changed. The part of fortune now is in Cancer in the 4th, not in Leo in the 5th. And that would obviously make a difference as well. So why is this? Why did we have that? Because of the different ascendant. You know how we spoke recently about the part of fortune. We learned how we realize where it is by moving the sun to the ascendant, and then the moon follows it by that many degrees. And in the previous chart, I had Taurus ascendant. So if I was to move my sun to the ascendant, the moon would have come to the 5th house and to Leo. Here, if I do the same thing, now I've got less number of degrees between the moon and the ascendant here. So that's why it's not in the 5th in Leo, but it's in the 4th in Cancer, in the previous sign. So it's just a way to see how things get adjusted when you go to a different place. Yeah, and for people that examine their upcoming solar returns in advance before they happen, maybe it gives a degree of control. Maybe we can really affect things by having that choice to move to a different location and maybe set the clock in a different way and set the chart in a different way. Even though I would rather personally leave it to chance and leave it to circumstances, because in my situation, for example, I wasn't really planning. I'm not planning very much where to be in this period of time. And it's been a lot of traveling. Every couple of weeks, I move to one of the other locations that I'm based on. And it wasn't planned to be in Valencia on my birthday this year. I could have been in London. I could have even been in Bulgaria if I had, planned to go there. So the mere fact that now this turns out to be my chart tells me that this was supposed to be my chart, if you see what I mean. So I kind of trust the chart itself and I try to read what tips it is trying to give me in terms of my best step of forward in my development for the coming year. So, okay, then I wanted to show you quickly London. This is really an example of how time zones affect the situation. This one is almost the same as the Valencia one. The sun is also in the 7th. We've got pretty much the same things here at the top. What changed here, I think, was the position of the sign. The house of the north node and the south node. You see here, they are in the 2nd and the 8th house. Well, in the previous one, they were in the 9th and the 3rd. So I think that's significant. It is especially significant when the nodes are coinciding with the meridian or the horizon in a solar return chart. That is considered to be a very faithful year. So a year that something important will turn around in the life of the person. Not in my case, but in general. If that was the case, that would have been important. So that's why I also keep an eye on where the nodes are in that particular year. Another coincidental thing that I realized while looking at that was that if you remember last time when we spoke about progressed composite charts, and I showed you my situation, how something important was going to come up next year. And I'm mentioning this because this next year event is going to be within this solar return for me. And I showed you how my partner and I in the composite are going to have a progress new moon next year. And that was going to fall on the 22nd degree of Sagittarius. And I was very surprised to discover that this is my south node on the solar return this year. So this makes things even more fateful in a way, karmic. So whatever is coming, whatever is in store for us as a couple next year, and I would be obviously involved in, would also have something to do with my south node for that year, and for his south node for that year as well, because he just happens to be born 1 month after me approximately, but still doesn't have it on that degree exactly. I have it on the same degree. So we'll see how this is going to play out. But these are just things to demonstrate how I think we shouldn't just fixate on the chart, but we also have to try to discover what else is going on, progressions, transits, your own chart, your own composites in your important relationships, because this eventually will tie into that chart. And then it's very helpful, I think, to do this. So this is my, let's say, real one. Excuse me. I should have turned that off. So this is counterimposing the birth chart on the solar return. And in astro.com, you can do that with the houses as well. And I find it really helpful with the houses because here you can see on the inner wheel is my birth chart. And on the outer wheel is the solar return chart. So what we're having here is, I just can see also not only that my moon on the solar return is on the MC, but it's also on my birth MC pretty much, or it's in the 10th house of the birth chart. And I can also see, for example, that the retrograde Mars that's in the 1st house of the solar return also falls in the 12th house of the birth chart. And these two things will mix together. The influence of both will mix together eventually. And the other way around, because, for example, it will be important that, I don't know what to give you as an example, that say in the same house where my progressed Venus is traveling in Virgo this year, I have very close to it my south node, even though in a different house. Yeah, so you can see how these things overlap. There is also a table of additional information in astro.com when you open that chart. I don't know if you're using these tables, but I use them all the time. They're so helpful to give us shortcuts to see things when it's very difficult to see on the chart in terms of aspects. And when you open that table, it will give you the aspects that your birth chart is making the planet's positions to the solar return chart as real angles. Also, not just the oppositions and the conjunctions, but also all the other aspects. So finally, you can look at it this way, which is without the houses. And this is the birth chart with the green signs around it. This is the positions of the solar return for the year. But that's not giving us any information of in what houses in the actual solar return these planets fall. And we know that this is important, actually, quite important. Yeah. So that's it for now. There were a few more peculiarities that I learned about that, including that topic of the Lord of the Year that we mentioned at the end of last week's discussion. If you remember, we spoke about the Lord of the Year, which is something that was totally new to me. I selected an article here for you, which is by the astrologer Kelly Surtees, maybe you know her. And she explains the idea behind all this. This is another technique called perfections in astrology. And one of the girls that was with us last week, I forgot her name, unfortunately, she was mentioning this and she explained it a little bit. But that's also something to do with solar returns. It's considered to be important to register what is the, so I know how to explain it in the easiest way. It's everything divisible by 12. So we have 12 houses of the chart, and each one of those 12 houses is accentuated, is extra important, or is, the one that we are concentrating on in every year in the solar return. And that's not the house in which the sun falls into, which is also very important, but it's usually, well, if you are 12 years old, 24 years old, 36 years old, and everything that is divisible by 12, then this would be a first house year. And this is the way then you follow along and you calculate every next year. So if it's 13 years old or 37 years old or 25 years old, whatever, that's going to be a second house year and so on. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out where am I then following that logic. And it's a bit difficult to calculate. So the way I do it is I jump to the next divisible by 12 year after my current birthday. So I'm going to be 33, so I can see that it will be easy to go back from 36. Yeah, so 36 years old would be a first house year. So then going back 3 brings me to the 10th house. So that's how I calculated that my important house for that year will be the 10th house. And if I go back to the actual solar return chart, I can see that, in fact, the 10th house is very important. I've got things going on in the 12th house. And my moon in one of the versions is also in the 10th house. But I mean, this is just something of a tip, something of a pointer for me. And the Lord of the Year is the planet ruling that house. For me, this would be 2 planets. Well, actually, no. This is the Valencia version of my chart. So I've only got Saturn here because it's Capricorn. Capricorn is the Lord of the Year. And Saturn, therefore, becomes actually Saturn, it will be more correctly to say, is the Lord of the Year in my case. So that's how you can calculate it for yourself as well. Yeah. But yes, you see how much of a difference this would have made if I was in Bulgaria, because then it would be Aquarius or Capricorn. And then I've got Uranus into the picture as well. And if we try to come up with an interpretation, it would be different, I imagine. All right, so I think that was enough of an introduction. Hopefully we can apply all this now to the next chart we're going to look at. So where would you like to go next? Any questions, comments, or if you want to volunteer with your chart? We're definitely going to look at yours, Lauren, but I don't know if you guys want to start with it or we can start with somebody else.
In the one that you, it makes me realize how important the variation of the way we do houses is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're saying that it's at that point in the solar return, the characters coming from the house as well very strongly. So all the different kinds of house discussions make that variation.
Yes, I appreciate that. And most of the sources that I looked at were basically giving a bit of a preference to the house systems that are dividing houses in accordance to space or time. So house systems like Placidus, Campanus, Regiomontanus, those ones. Only because in this particular technique of astrology, the solar return, the house positions are very important. So it kind of makes more sense to choose a house system which is also using as a preference the house positions and not the zodiac, because nothing wrong with the other ones, but they are concentrating on the zodiac.
Again, you said Placidus.
Placidus, Campanus, Regiomontanus, maybe others as well. It's just the ones that come to mind. So Placidus is time-based.
Okay.
Regiomontanus and Campanus are space-based. So, but all of them, they're all quadrant ones. So quadrant house systems are the ones, it's just a reminder of our discussion on house systems. If you guys are interested and you haven't been, if you want to watch that, it's on the channel. So remember, the quadrant ones were the ones that were dividing the chart in 4 sectors, with the importance of the angles being extremely looked at. So the fixing of the horizon, fixing of the meridian in those particular perpendicular positions to one another.
And the other question I had from your presentation was, you said that you couldn't tell the house position of when the green was on the outside there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why not? Why was that not? Because when I looked at it, I thought we could.
Yeah, let's go back to it so it becomes clear what I'm referring to. So you see, in this one, we've got 2 sets of houses. We've got the houses of my birth chart.
Yes.
So this is ordered. Here is the ascendant where we usually see it. And we can see where the planets in houses fall. So then when we look at the solar return positions of everything in sign, we can also see that, for example, the moon in Aquarius on the solar return is falling in my birth 10th house here. Yeah. But we can also see here that it is falling in the solar return 11th house.
Yes.
This bit. Yeah. So that same moon in the solar return, it has 2 different house positions. The house position in the actual solar return chart, 11th house, and the house position over my chart, 10th house. Does that make sense?
Yes, but there was another one you showed.
Yes, I'm going to it now.
Oh, okay. That's I thought, well, couldn't we figure it out? But maybe not. There, that one.
No, we couldn't figure it out that easily because yes, we can see here that the solar return ascendant is in Aries.
Yes.
So we can pretty much orient ourselves in space. And we can, looking into that, we can see, oh, well, then the moon will probably be somewhere at the top of the chart. But we cannot be really certain where exactly.
Good. Okay, because I was thinking, yeah, we still can see where the ascendant is. We can estimate it, but we can't. And so it falling in the house of the other is not as important of where it is in its own position.
Well, what I've read is that both of them are important.
Okay.
Most of the places that I looked at were saying, look both ways. So look how your solar one affects the natal and how the natal affects the solar. Because the natal doesn't really affect the solar, but the way it affects it is that the solar will come to life more if it is repeating some of the same topics that you've got in your natal. You see, that's the logic behind that. Well, the other logic is a bit like a transit logic. So the solar return chart is affecting the natal more as a transit, the way we would interpret a transit.
And how important is it to do one that would be natal, progressed, and then solar return?
What I would do is, if I look at the solar return chart, and it's, I'm curious to start formulating some suggestions about real things, real events, say, or directions of my life. I would use my progress chart, to add more to the story, if you see what I mean. So my progress chart will tell me where I am, at what stage of my life personally at that particular moment, so at that particular year as well. And some people construct progress solar return chart. So that's a bit strange as a concept. Not many people do it, but that's got nothing to do with progressing the actual solar return, because how do we do that? That doesn't make any sense. But it is at the chart of the day, not when you were born and when the sun came back to the same place, but the chart of the day when the sun this year goes to the same position where you currently have your progress sun. So, for example, I've got my sun in Scorpio in the first degree. That's what we are looking for a normal solar return. But my progress sun is currently at the fourth degree of Sagittarius. So we are going to have the sun at the fourth degree of Sagittarius sometime at the end of November. And I can check when. I can check what day that would be. And if I look at the transits, or in other words, if I construct a chart of that day, that is going to be my progressed solar return. Yeah?
I get it. Okay.
And so Ronald Davison, for example, is saying in his book that he has observed that and he has studied that, and it turns out that it gives very good results as well. That really it's got to do with what the person gets involved in. And maybe the answer will be that if we are really following our progressions, if we are really living our progressions, and we are kind of up to date with them, then it's more likely for that other solar return chart, the progress one, to have any relevance to us.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, anything else? Yes, Stephen?
Yes, I'd like to share a thought as far as the theme was from last week was suggested. I thought, all right, because we're doing the relationship charts, and I thought, all right, well, let me do, following what you were saying, when I calculated my solar return, I got an exacting time for my sun to be in the same degree in minutes. And so I did relocated for where I'm living now, which is permanent, so not unlike yours, being maybe 3 months or 2 months, one way or another. And I thought, all right, now that I have that exacting time, I'm going to do a progression from a solar arc, actually, from my natal position using that exacting time. So if I'm thinking of two things with a progression and then a transit, which is actually the solar return, I said, all right, well, let me put both those points together. So I have, then I have the progressed solar arc with the same time as my solar return. So then I have two things going. I thought, all right, well, I have two things going, and they're both related to me. So I said, well, let me do a relationship chart. So then I took my progressed and my solar return, and I did a relationship chart as a coalesced. So that gave me the idea between my solar return and my progression, and then a relationship, how I would interact to both those events occurring at the same moment of time. Now, the interesting point that you did with the Ronald Davison book is that he was the one who designed the Davison relationship system.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yes.
No.
Ronald. So it's like, that's why it's called the Davison relationship chart. He was the one who designed it, which was, it was supposed to be the improvement over against the slap together, do the midpoints and call that a composite. He was saying, well, no, because if we do the averaging between the time and location, then we can progress that relationship. So that gave me the kind of insight. So, okay, well, let me do a relationship chart between my progression to the time of my solar return. But since I'm within myself and not two different people, I thought, well, rather than do a relationship chart between Tweedledee and Tweedledum, I'll do a coalesced chart, which would be the harmonic relationship between both of those. And now I have, like one family picture where everyone's in one frame. Now that was just
What did you learn from that?
Well, what Lena was pointing out, obviously, the ascendants make a difference. They're different. So it's like, what type of theme fits the best kind of clothes, or what is an underlying theme between both of them, where they would overlap, or I would miss something in my progression because the transit might be more of a presentation rather than a theme. But the idea of the theme being that it carries past the transit itself. So
and when you look at it, did it really? What I'm trying to say is, what was the example in your life? Did it practically fit?
Well, that's the moot point, because I don't have any examples, because my birthday isn't going to be coming up until June. So, you know, these are previews of coming attraction, but the idea that to have the little antenna out as far as the sensory thing of being able to anticipate themes that would be reflected in each one of those individual charts, but then combined as an overlapping direction.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
and it will be very interesting then to see which one you're more responsive to.
Yeah.
Whether you've been more responsive to your progressed one or the other one. I don't know very much about the technique of Davidson charts. Maybe we can do one time discussion of that if you want, so we learn about it. But yes, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't know that this is the same person that originated it.
Yeah. I thought you'd find that very interesting, because I didn't know that he did a book about solar returns, and I agree with you very much that, you know, it presses the point as a skewed thing to use it as a predictive of events itself, rather than a better understanding of how events are unfolding.
Yes, it's a bit of an old-fashioned book. I found it secondhand somewhere, and I don't think it's in print anymore.
No, most likely not. So good for you. You've got an out-of-print book.
Yes, well, it's good actually. It's obviously old because he's giving a very lengthy explanation of how to calculate our solar return, and this is before computers, obviously. So we couldn't,
Correct. Yeah.
we
So
couldn't
now
do
we
that
get to press the
any
button.
other way. But yes, Emma, did you want to say something?
Yes, can we look at my solar return chart?
Yes. Do you want to share it, or do you want me to open it for you?
Let me share it.
Okay, go.
How can I do that?
Just press on share screen, and we're gonna see your screen.
Start share.
You should open it on your screen and then just press it.
Wait, I think like this. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hold on. Okay, so this is my solar return. Just like you, I really love to leave it up to chance. I had no idea where I was going to be this year, and I happened to be in a little village in Italy. And I definitely did not want to have an 8th house year after all that has been happening to me over the past year and a half. I was ready for like a 10th house or a 1st house year. So I can just, actually I didn't really take a look at my solar return at all, but I can just do an interpretation of what I see, unless you want to do it in a
What
different.
comes to mind when you look at it?
I'm sorry, what?
Just what comes to mind when you look at it.
Okay.
So this is from this year, August,
Mm-hmm.
to next August. So you're right, you're not in the middle, but it's already into it, isn't it?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, actually, I'm feeling some of these themes. Okay, here's a few things I notice. So the first thing is that the moon is conjunct the ascendant in Capricorn. So for me, anytime something is rising and it's such a close orb, the ascendant is like the private identity, right? And the moon there means the center of my experience is really going to be about me building an understanding and a comfort with who I'm becoming or who I am in this year. And being that it's in Capricorn, I imagine there's going to be a lot of building a self-confidence. There's going to be hard work, going a little bit into deeper and deeper layers of what I believe in myself. And you can see there's this Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn mess happening just below the horizon, and it's ready to rise, right? And so for me, it's like what's just hiding, like what the theme is these outer planets coming up and revealing themselves in my life. So for me, it's like, okay, whatever happened over the course of this COVID time is somehow just beneath the surface for me. And it's something that I'm going to be looking at, especially with that opposition to Mercury in Cancer. What I'm hearing is my mind is going to be really concerned with safety and comfort in other people, spending time in the outer world, building a little bit more with my public experience and needing like to make my home there, like to be with others, opposed to my need for solitude and building of patience and self-confidence and whatever else. And besides that, now I see that they're both squaring Mars in a T-square in Aries. This to me signifies like a lot of pressure on me acting for myself, on my ideas, with my intuition, and being primarily motivated. I guess since he's in the fourth house, you can see I'm using whole sign system. So I know it's a bit different, but he's close enough to the IC. Let's just say he's conjunct more or less. For me, this is a lot like, and also Mars is kind of alone in that part of the chart. So for me, it's like, okay, needing to really get in touch with my private experience of the world and act from whatever I'm feeling to do, rather than needing to think about my safety and need to be with other people and about my need for solitude. It's more like, okay, just go and do what you feel to do based on what you're feeling right here, right now. And then with the sun in the 8th house, that tells me that it's going to be a lot of my secrets being exposed, a lot of my shameful things or like weird things with other people that's going to come to the surface. And I'm going to have to face that by just going for it. Okay, that's my quick interpretation. I don't know if you guys want to say anything.
No, makes a lot of sense. I was wondering while looking at this chart, if something family related may come into the picture here, because one of the things that Sun in the 8th house sometimes refers to, maybe you know, is not just your personal secrets, but like skeletons in the closet of the family. So I've noticed that people that deal with 8th house ears, sometimes they need to discover things about their own parents or their own family, something like this. Looking at that Capricorn against Cancer, which is like the main theme of this chart, it's very pronounced, isn't it? It's just everything revolves around this T square as a whole. And we've got Mars in the 4th. And what got my attention is that, I don't know if you know the chart of Bulgaria, but it is Capricorn ascendant with Moon in Capricorn on the ascendant. So considering you Bulgarian, I thought maybe this would be relevant because that's very, very much like a throwback to the Bulgarian chart. Same ascendant, same, and this square to your 4th house, and then the sun in the 8th. This whole thing tells me that maybe you would need to assert yourself in front of family somehow, or distance, or I don't know, unfinished business with family, so that this 1st house can really come out. And I don't know. This is just a suggestion. Maybe I'm not right. But...
Well, you know, look. So if we put in my natal.
Okay, that would now make more sense.
Okay, let me actually just flip the two, right? This makes more sense. Okay, so I can see now superimposed in this way that what was before the 1st house, super busy, is actually happening in the bigger picture of my entire life within the 9th house on top of Jupiter.
Right.
So for me, this also has a lot to do with like living within the actual framework of my belief system.
Oh, that's very, you've got exactly the same IC and MC as myself, by degree. That's interesting to me. And we've got the same MC and IC, 0 degrees Aquarius and Leo. Exactly. So that's interesting. You've got a sun in the 4th house by birth. So that's interesting also. Right, what's going on here?
Yeah, for me, actually, I mean, yeah, when you overlay them like this, for me, the most interesting thing is that all of this is happening in my 9th house. And that is particularly strange because this entire past year, my entire focus has been on my relationship to God. But then there's this bridge between what I believe to be true and what I actually do from day to day in real life, right? So as soon as I saw this, the first thing that popped into my head is, okay, the ascendant and all that stuff is happening in the 9th house. So now I actually have to exist as my faith, you know? So it's more of a philosophical kind of year, I guess, in terms of developing my own identity.
Yeah, and we won't be able to see that if we don't superimpose them one over the other, to see how, in what respect you need to work on the 1st house. So we know that, kind of as you said, you need to work on the 1st house through the 9th house. Which is very interesting. Yeah, and you've got Jupiter in the 9th. Well, actually, all of the 4 angles you've got exactly the same. That's a big coincidence. I don't know if you guys would agree, but how often does it happen to people that are not born in the same year, day, whatever, month, have exactly the same MCIC and descendant and descendant at the same time?
That is really, but I'm not surprised by these things anymore. They're just starting to happen so often. I'm like, okay, so.
Okay, so you're some sort of a twin, supposed to be some sort of a twin to me in this respect. Anyway, that I was just very, very interested in that. Okay, Saturn and also the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 0 Aquarius will be on our MC. Exactly. That's something I expect to be prominent for me.
So let's see if I'm not muted. What would make now in the solar return, everything's in your 9th house. And when you first showed it to us, everything was in your 1st house. So what is the variation of that?
So if you see, this is when I have my natal as the first chart, and then the solar return as the second.
Okay.
And then if I
the ascendant being there at 4 degrees Capricorn, then that's how it became that if that were the ascendant, then all those things would be in your 1st house.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then if I switch them, you can see that that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another way. I mean, with this software, that's another way to do the same thing as we did before.
Well, I thought, just looking at it with all of that stuff in the 1st house in Capricorn and the Mars in the 4th and the Sun in the 8th, I looked at it as being taking a lot more responsibility and maybe going into a mortgage or sorting your home out as a firm base. I don't know. I just thought of shared resources and mortgages and things. The Sun in the 8th.
Is that what's on your mind, Beryl, recently?
No, it's not. But that's where I would put other people's money and mortgages and, I don't know, security.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I could see that definitely being a theme this year. I don't know about mortgages. That is a big responsibility I've never had. So, but maybe, who knows?
Maybe you could be thinking of it or joining, you know, that's how I was looking at it. Nothing sort of psychological.
No, but actually that's really, for me, it's an amazing interpretation because the past 1.5, 2 years, I've been homeless. I mean, I've just been traveling and having no base. And now I need some kind of safety. And I've been feeling like I want to create a home. And because I have the sun in the 4th house, it's like I need to shine in the home. And I'm just realizing that now, that I want to be the star at home. So it could be, it's really something I'm searching for this year. Thank you for that.
Well, very, very much along the lines of what Beryl said. Beryl, you were very concrete about the mortgage thing. But maybe it's just about sharing resources with other people, getting mixed up and codependent.
Yes, I think so. But I feel all of the Capricorn stuff in the 1st house is like taking responsibility. You know.
Could I ask, why have you chosen the whole sign house system?
For so many reasons, but the primary one, honestly, is it's just so much simpler for me to visualize it in this way, because I do place like primarily all of the importance on the actual zodiac and the story of the 12 archetypes that I feel are equally expressed in my life, and giving them each voice fully responsibility for one house. Yeah, and there's a lot more to it about the actual geometry and astronomy of it that makes sense to me, but I only do it for natal and for solar return.
Well, it may be interesting to compare what you've got as a result here with this house system with one of the others, just for the sake of experiment, because I would suggest that, you know, the thing about the houses, not many people just know it. Yes, it is simpler and easier to use whole sign and so on, but not always what is simpler and easier is better, because it's more personal when we use the houses. It's less personal when we use the zodiac, because the zodiac is more of a unifying archetype for everyone and everything since the beginning of time, kind of thing. While the houses are very married to your own personal circumstances, your personal path, and your own kind of unique setting of everything, not just psychologically, but also physically. And if you look at that, then you may discover that the new positions of houses, planets falling into different houses, maybe more to do with what goes on in this year for you, or what you're discovering for yourself. But why not compare? I mean, I'm going to actually, that's a good idea. I may actually do the opposite. I'll use your system and try after today to calculate before my birthday the solar return with whole sign, for example, and see how things develop over time. And whether, I mean, but I would suggest that the houses are just more personal factors in this whole scheme. Because, for example, on the solar return, if we've got something around the cusp of any house, not just the angles, then that becomes very important as an influence. And that makes it more important to establish where that cusp actually is. Yeah. I would as well say whatever we believe in, that's what comes up. So maybe another way to look at it.
Actually, look at that. What just came up when you said that, I just noticed my natal Mars is right on the descendant of the solar return. Without getting too philosophical about this, yeah, I actually really agree with you about trying different things, but it's like, actually, this is a message I want to share in general. I feel like astrology is so complex in general that for those of us beginning to learn, which I'm definitely a beginner, it's really like trying to stick with the whole sign first until we learn the significations makes a lot of sense. And no matter in which way we do the house interpretation or whichever house systems we use, it's going to work because it depends on the interpretation, what we see. And all those energies could be expressed in a certain way. I mean, just to say that I really agree with you. And also I use Placidus or Regiomontanus for different reasons, or sometimes just to do the comparison. So I have seen the Placidus, but this for me is like how I can just learn and not worry about like all of the very different,
I really don't see the logic behind this, because you learn the same way about the zodiac, whatever system you use. And I think it's generally the problem is that people really don't have enough information about what the house systems really are about. What's the philosophy underneath them? And I see that you have this philosophical inclination like I do as well, and many of us here do, not everybody. So I feel like if you discover the other side of the story, you would be more attracted to it. But maybe only because you haven't discovered it. But for people that really want to simplify, they don't want to look for psychological or philosophical explanations behind why we do things the way we do them. They would just be comfortable with the easiest possible system, because that gives them answers quickly. That gives them, turnaround quickly, without too much, But it's not more difficult. The other house systems, they're not more difficult. They're just not neatly placing every house over every sign of the zodiac. That makes it even more interesting, because you can see how, for example, in one of the houses, say the fifth house, you've got two signs participating there, and you are both signs in that house. Yeah, and so, or in certain houses, you don't have, you only have, let's say, one sign covering two complete houses, and that these intersections are very, very significant in the life of someone.
Is there a way to display it so that the ascendants match up to the real ascendants, and then you look at the natal and the solar return, where both ascendants are showing at the ascendant point?
Well, you can't do that because they won't be together. They won't be the same. You have to choose one or the other. You have to choose which one of the two charts you want to display with the ascendant where it is. And then the other one will be almost like you're doing a synastry. But what I like better about my, well, not mine, but the astro.com format of showing the two charts together, because there is a thicker line for the ascendant. I won't be able to share before you stop sharing the email. But if you want to stop for just a second, you can come back to it. I just wanted to, because you guys are asking, wanted to show you that other one. That's really my favorite, because you see here how I've got my ascendant. This is the birth chart on the inside. So the ascendant is where it's meant to be. But then here you also have a thick line for the ascendant, descendant, MC, and IC. So for a moment, you can visually ignore the middle and look at the side, the outer wheel, and it will be easier to realize where it is as a cross. That's what those other house systems, the quadrant ones, really say is really important, to know where the horizon and the meridian are, because they are framing the whole chart. They're framing the whole experience. So I don't know, maybe you're a curious case for me because of the same cross that we've got, and you've got very different energies zodiacally. Like, I think your sun is square my sun, for example. But when we look at the cross of incarnation, which is the four angles, it's meant to be very similar as an experience, as a turnaround, but in a different style. Kind of, we do the same thing, but in a different style. So I don't know if there's any sense in that. Okay, I can stop sharing this. And if you want to share something else.
What I noticed is in those two charts that Emma had put up there, I was looking at the North Node, and it looks, since you were saying nodes are important in this methodology, right? Like the ascendant is important, the North Node would be important. Is that true?
Yeah, that's what I think, yeah.
And so if, Emma, could you put your chart back up? I was noticing, like, on his natal chart, the North Node is in the 6th house, right? And this year, it looks almost like if I followed the ascendant for the solar return, it's also in the 6th house. Is that true? I know it's sitting in your, but if Earth, no, that wouldn't be. Let's see, where's that North Node?
Oh, I see what you mean.
You see, if I can't point to it, but if I pressed it along, it looks like your evolutionary point is going to be from this year on top of, also in the 6th house. If I could switch it where ascendant was on with ascendant.
Yeah, you're right. That is something actually, probably.
So meaning you were talking about, and you think of the 6th house serving others, and not being so alone, I have it like the opposite in my chart. So it's where my North Node is in the 12th, but my South Node is in the 6th. And I really think those are very dominant in one's life, so that you're coming from, possibly you're moving more and more to others and serving others this year.
With these there especially.
But this is an example, this chart is an example of the solar return nodes being on the ascendant, the actual solar return chart. And that on itself is very important. This whole dilemma that you need to solve around the opposition between Cancer and Capricorn, whatever that's about, it will obviously come out as pressure in the 4th house through the Mars, as that's the point of the T-square. And whatever that's about is also going to be karmic, because the expression of the pressure is also the opposition between the nodes of the year.
And I'm wondering one other thing, actually. Okay. Do you guys ever look also at the speed of planets?
In what way?
It's just something that really piqued my interest recently, just to see how close they are to stationing direct or retrograde. Because then I feel like, for example, if you have a Mercury, let's say this Mercury, you can see here the speed is 1 degree, 39 arc minutes about per day.
Yeah.
So in the solar return chart, if he's, let's say, stationed almost, which is moving, let's say, at about 0 degrees and 15 arc minutes, then I imagine you would really be mentally stuck in this one place. And you would just be thinking about that a lot and spending almost all of your time communicating, trying to figure out this one thing, this one topic. And I've noticed that that also happens in the natal charts, like somebody that gets stuck in a mode of being from a really slow Mercury, for example, or the Venus speed or the Mars speed, you know, those kind of indicate how quickly those planets want to move or do their business. The moon as well, even though.
Well, there is a whole big topic about the speed of the moon that is discovered by Stephen Forrest in his book, The Book of the Moon. And he speaks about how in certain speeds, so we can have people with fast moves by birth and slow moves by birth. He doesn't say that the other two, Mercury or Venus or Mars are so significant, but it will always be significant regardless of the planet if something is stationary direct or stationary retrograde. That I've heard is even a sign of somehow prominence in that area of connected to the planet if you have it by birth. And it's also very significant when you have something like this by progression. So say if you had a retrograde Mercury by birth, it's very important the year of life when that Mercury becomes direct by progression, the age and the year of life. So that's going to make a very big, account for a very big change in your thinking or your, mental attitude or whatever, for example. So yeah, that would be very interesting. We can go even deeper and deeper into this as much as we want to. I really imagine that as trying to analyze a birth chart. Same. And some people go into a lot of techniques, a lot of different additional things. Others are sticking to the basics. So we really have a lot of room to experiment, I think, with this chart.
Yeah, does anyone else want to put up their chart?
Yeah, shall we go to Lawrence now? Lauren, are you up for it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let me see where it is. Sorry if you can just bear with me. Okay, Lauren. Here we go. So it's a little slow.
When you think about it, it's all a miracle, all the technology that we're all talking from different parts of the country. We're looking at charts. I mean, it's nothing to take for granted.
Amen.
Isn't it? Oh, what's going on here? Why is it not opening? Okay, well, I can quickly go straight to here then. I'll have you saved. Sorry to keep you waiting. You can talk to each other while I do this. It's such a long list of people. Here you go. Yes.
Let's see what's going on this year, Lauren.
It'll be interesting. It's been a hell of a week.
I have to switch to something else because that's the natal with I want to show you just the actual solar return. It was quite interesting, I think. Or maybe it opens now down here. Yes, here we are. That's the proper one. So obviously the slow planets are the same for everyone, if you noticed. You
Now,
also
but you put my reference place as Valencia, Spain there. So we have to
Alright.
switch that.
Okay, well, good, well noticed. Well noticed. So then we go back here, and when I calculate the chart, I'm going to show. This is a good, opportunity to show everyone how to change the location place. Maybe I don't know if you know how to do that. So we go to
No, it's just
solar return, and then when that opens, you go to the bottom, and there is click to choose a different reference place. And here, there is an option to just say the birthplace. So I've got your birthplace saved on the chart. So when I do that, it's going to automatically calculate to your position. But actually, are you living in your birthplace, Lauren? I forgot to ask that.
No, I'm living in, you could put Medford, Oregon, or Ashland,
Okay, sorry.
Oregon.
So that's a different zone, is it? It's not close to
Yes,
this.
one's East Coast and now I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah, you see, everything changed. We had completely
That's
different.
Yeah, it's something to see.
Yes. That really matters what place we calculate for. Okay, so then sorry, I don't know why it's so slow. Okay, what was the town again?
Well, the closest one is Phoenix, Oregon. So just if it has Phoenix, Oregon, I'm just across. I'm in the country, so
There we
but
are. Yeah.
that's good. That's it. That would be then accurate to where I am.
Okay, that's great. Okay, that's the chart for Phoenix, Oregon.
That's great.
Sun in the 12th house. Well, I thought it was interesting because of the new moon happening on your birthday. Pretty exact, you see, and Chiron in between the sun and the moon.
Is this from last year or this year that the
No.
sun is on?
So that was March 24th, 2020.
Okay.
So that was your last birthday. And this is basically the chart that you have been following since then. Maybe you can give us some feedback of how accurate that is because you're already living it.
Well, certainly I've been by myself in the 12th house, doing a lot of meditation and a lot of astrology, serving others through astrology, and the fact that they're and feeling, I guess that it's almost like all those three planets, the sun, the moon, and Chiron. It's like I've had to, it's almost like I've come together to who I am in Aries. It's a funny thing to be in the 12th house with all that action energy.
Oh, you got the square from the notes.
Okay.
To both
Yes.
the sun and the moon. And did you, I think you shared before that you had the feeling of a new beginning this year.
Yes, because all my concerts, all my music came apart in March. My birthday, by March, it had begun because on the 17th of, I let my hair go. I removed the color from my hair. I had a very different type of year, and didn't know what to do with everything of my life canceled. I had already memorized all my parts and had been rehearsing for all the concerts that would begin in March. I had my first concerts were right after my birthday, and in March, and then all through April and all through June, and all of those fell away, and I was just by myself in my house. So it was a switch of purposes, and now although my music has been with me for my entire life, now my focus is astrology and being sky medicine horse, which is the Pleiadian light work, and my Native American training, and doing more of those things and getting involved in Zoom. So I'd say I've had the complete switch of career, except the other one is still on the back burner, but and everything I had before fell away. That is so true. And then it's such a strong 10th house as well, right?
Yes, it's not only that, but also you see how there is a big concentration on one side of the chart. So
Oh, yeah.
that that's the hemisphere concentration. You can read in that book by the woman that I showed you. She speaks about all the different options, like having a concentration on the different hemispheres, the different quadrants. And that's also important when we read that. And here you've got something like a year concentrated on the outside world and yourself. It's not that much about relationships. It's not that much about interaction with other people. It's more about how I feel about myself and how I fit into the more. This 12 houses is very interesting. It's like discharging from the past, but at the same time a new beginning because of the new moon. And it's very literal. You see how when the moon and the sun are together, we've got the part of fortune on the ascendant. And the part of fortune is in the beginning of Taurus, where you've got quite a lot of things going on in your personal chart.
Oh, it's actually 2 degrees is my sun in of Taurus. And no, not my sun. Wait a minute. In Taurus, my moon, my Venus, wherever my Venus is and Mars are conjunct in Taurus in my natal chart.
Yes.
And so that's interesting there. Yes.
Very much. So this is the big accent on the ascendant. And on this, so in other words, again, we're being told a new beginning. So I wanted to show it with the birth chart together. And this option with the houses. So we can see now we've got, so this is the inner wheel with the birth chart, isn't it? And the new moon is obviously on the sun because the sun is meant to be in the same place. But then here, the ascendant of the solar return is on the Mars-Venus conjunction.
Yes.
So with the part of fortune and Uranus.
Well, it certainly has been a year like no others. It was complete shock. And I can hardly believe that I am even thriving and thrilled to be working as an astrologer as my main thing right now. It hasn't, I never even ever, I once put out that I was an astrologer doing readings for people, and it hasn't stopped. It's just this natural flow towards this new place.
Very good. And also another 12th house thing that now we can see that this stellium of planets in the 10th is falling in your natal 12th. So the planets in the 10th here in the solar return are over the 12th house in the natal. So the solar return is activating your own 12 through mostly to the events from the outside world, because all those planets are slow planets. While at the same time you're doing your own reconfiguration in the 12 personally with the new moon in the solar return.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you. You know, I'm looking at that little fire, air, earth, water. And is that, what is that? Is that showing the solar return? Or?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because we're meant to also pay attention to this balance of elements in the solar return. Is that maybe a very big shift from what we actually are as an natal chart? Here we've got only one planet in, so yeah, this is about the solar return summary.
Yeah, because I only have one planet in air.
Yes.
And in my own chart, my natal chart, it's air is more dominant. With being an Aquarian ascendant and a Mercury. No, that's different. Anyway.
That's, again, coming up that same degree of Saturn or 0 degree Aquarius. I keep coming back to it. I know here it's also important because earlier in the year, when Saturn was direct, at some point, you know, around your birthday, obviously, if not on your birthday, it entered Aquarius for a short while. And that's 0 degrees Aquarius in your solar return. Then it came back to Capricorn. Currently, it's in Capricorn. And then the big conjunction in December is again in 0 degrees Aquarius. So you're basically And this is the only one. So being a singleton like that by element makes Saturn quite important. So I would suggest that in December, something will be finalized or something will be reinforced by what this year is really about for you in general.
Sorry, I forgot to turn, it's by the time I run over there, I forgot to turn off my ringer down here.
That's why I've got the mute button. What do you guys think about the chart, Lauren?
Yeah, Lauren, I see something interesting here in regards to your astrology gig. Because having this Jupiter in the third sounds to me like the word of God. And then Venus being right on top of him is like grounding that energy and pulling it into your life. Because I see Venus as it says this thing that makes things very real, right? It kind of makes them, it shows up in your life as something that you need to just bring in. And then having this Uranus that's rising in the solar return conjuncture part of fortune is like another confirmation of this sort of like spark of inspiration, like this, and also having this ascendant in the 20th Aries. It's like just this first house alone and the aspects that it's making and the fact that it's happening on top of your Venus Mars conjunction tells me that this year is going to teach you a lot about that specific area of your chart, what Venus and Mars are doing together. And for me, that aspect is always like the combination of polarities. In this case, of course, Venus is stronger, being that she rules inside of Taurus. So I feel like this could be a lot of your divine feminine being Mars blasted into the outer world. So I can see that starting to become a much more integrated part of your identity. But maybe I'm just kidding.
And one thing that happened this year that I'm just right on the brink of it, is because my whole website fell. And then I learned that even though I've been songbird music all my life, or since I started it, and I have my recordings, I didn't realize that they just are out in the world and I'm not earning the money from them, but other people are, and that my site doesn't have it. I've kind of been playing with the idea of making on my site now and giving all my 9 albums just out to the world and make it all free and make my site without money, except when I have to send a CD or send a book, and go from this old paradigm of receiving money for my work, and instead trying to get it out and just make it all like a free library for everybody who could benefit from any of my recordings that were always done with the idea of how can I serve and benefit people while I'm on the planet? What can I do to uplift people or to stimulate people or to bring peace or understanding among different cultures? Or the other side was, how do I help uplift and relax people? So by making them all free, that would be, I'm sitting right inside that decision right now to go away from the monetary exchange, except when I have to give send a CD in the mail type thing. So I think that's kind of coordinated with that new beginning. And then the way that I survive being through my astrology readings.
Yes, well, I think even what you said about giving away your music is more relevant to the 12th house legacy leaving kind of thing, which one of the things that is required for the 12th house experience, especially when you are of a more serious age in your life, like a more advanced age in your life, when you've got something to really give away and to teach others or to contribute or whatever, then the 12th house aspects in transits, for example, you have one of the outer planets to the 12th house, it urges you to think about what you need to dispose of that you're not using or that you're too attached to materially, and at the same time, what's the essence of yourself that you can give forward to let's say, to the next generation or to the world or whatever. So that makes a lot of sense to me in this respect. And
that I experienced when I discovered, I've been constantly discovering this year how the music is out there, and that that all my stuff, it may not even come back to me, and I certainly am not receiving any of the monetary exchange. So why not just do it myself? If everybody else is out there doing my music, let them go ahead and make the money, but let me at least give it all through myself, and have a website where everything is available to everybody for free. So yeah, and the wound is that at first I felt robbed or stolen from, or that there were thieves out there and they were the Googles and the Amazons that unwittingly, I didn't realize that they had distributed my music. And there's all the countries that it's available now through Google and Amazon, and all those big countries that are making, and the corporations are making the money. But the point was always to serve people through the music. That's why I came for this lifetime, I think. Besides,
Chiron speaking, isn't it? Now we see what the Chiron is all about between the sun and the moon in the 12th house. And this is the throwback to your own Chiron in the 12th house, I think. You see, you've got Chiron in the 12th house by birth. And then this same Chiron is now mixed up in the situation of the new moon in the 12th.
You
Oh,
know,
I
also
see.
noted. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was like looking about, please, you go ahead. I just saw what I needed to see.
Yeah, you know, for me, but of course, you know, I always come up with this when I hear your story. It's like you have this Neptune transiting your Mercury retrograde, which is, of course, a once in a lifetime transit. And they're even mutually applying in this case. So this is like really leaning in to compassion and to love, to tranquility, like really opening up these Neptunian qualities to everyone else, especially having that Mercury in the first house. Having Neptune traversing over him for me is like a dissolution of the self-involved mind to lean into compassion and give self to other.
And it's also something like a Mercury return, not exactly because they're not one over the other, but not every year we've got Mercury in the same sign in the solar return as we do in the natal. And in this year you do. So, and this is in Pisces. As Emma said, this is a very strong Neptunian thing. Maybe here it's good before we end with this chart. Maybe it's good to mention that it may not be very obvious for other people who may be listening to this, that when we look at the solar return, the slow planets are actually the transits. So the slow planets are the current transits as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, everything is, but just a few days after the birthday, the faster planets will move away, while the slow ones are pretty much the underlying theme of transits for this year. Like, because we recently did speak with Lauren privately about her chart, and a lot was concentrated around this Neptune on the Mercury.
Yes, I remember that. Yes, that was in fact, that was almost the crux of what seemed like the most dominant.
Yes, exactly. So you see how everything ties in, the progressions, the transits, solar return.
Can I hop in with one more observation?
Sure.
Okay, so if I calculated this in my head correctly, you're in an 8th house perfection year. So that would be Libra in your case. So Venus is the ruler of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, this makes her even more, because not only is she in the 1st house, but in terms of your solar return, she's on top of your Jupiter. And in your solar return, Uranus is on top of your natal Venus. So again, it's like Venus is super active in this year.
Very well spotted. Very well spotted. And I think we may even discover more aspects to Venus if we look at the tables. Let's just do it as for the sake of example. I just pressed on tables.
Because these things are also happening in Taurus as well, Venus being in Taurus. So Venus this year is super strong, you know. And generally when you start to look at these different timing techniques, there's going to be so many indicators pointing towards the same theme.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say to people every time, that this is, for example, that's how I do things, like when we need to interpret a chart, trying to look at all those places, maybe not all, but at least a few, and they always are repeated topics. Always there is a pointer to the same thing from all sorts of techniques that otherwise have nothing to do with each other. They're not tied into each other necessarily. So yes, I think this is a great discovery about the Venus. And Venus, I think, makes a lot of squares as well. So I'm trying to make this bigger for what's going on. That's a very handy table because you can see here how the natal Venus is making so many squares and other aspects to the solar return planets. And at the same time, we've got the solar return Venus on the natal Jupiter, exactly. And exactly square the natal Pluto, which is extremely significant. But that's not very obvious when we just look at the wheel, isn't it?
It's not obvious at all, yeah.
But
And
when
it's
you hear,
it's trine Chiron. Aha.
see, makes sense.
Because yes, it was such a wound in a way, and then it's the only way to solve the wound was to be surrender.
I think you made the greatest decision you could have possibly made because we also know how attached Venus in Taurus could be to its position.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a battle between the Venus and the 12th house dynamics from all sorts of places, maybe. Let's say Piscean 12th house dynamics or Neptunian themes. Or maybe we can say a fight between Taurus and Pisces. Shall I cling to it or shall I give it away? Kind of thing.
And since it almost like it was so crushing, it was like information after information, and all the reason that it went out through Amazon and Google and all that was because the company I was involved with used to also send out all my recordings. So it was like all lumped together and I couldn't really see what was happening. Mm-hmm. And now it's just like, well, I have book after book where I wrote, I'm doing this, I'm going through this because I want to serve the planet and all the humanity while I'm here doing this gift I have. And I work so hard. And then the wound of not, the Venus aspect is also not just money for me, it's more like the worth. When you feel that you've been stolen from or thieved from, or that kind of energy is so difficult, then there's this liberation to give it away. And even last week in our group, I said, did anybody want any of my recordings? And it's because I had them all on my desktop because I'm preparing to give everything away. So it was wonderful. The people that said something about my recordings, it made me feel so happy that they were going out and people were appreciating them in their life. So it was the real value that I care about because I've never lived my life to make money.
Yes, this is a kind of a reevaluation of Venus topics for you personally. What is Venus all about for you? Where really the value stands and all sorts of questions like that, which was the challenge. Maybe the point isn't to completely give it away. Maybe the point is to maybe look for a middle solution or whatever. But the real desire to do that is already the job done, isn't it? As far as the energies are concerned.
It's already been done. They it's already out there. Anybody can access it, but I now can do it from my full self. It's for everyone. And it doesn't mean that I can afford to send everybody the actual physical CDs or that type thing, but the digital aspect, why not offer it out and just to see what happens, to come through it another way. That part of the reward is if it benefits people.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to, because I just saw this, it's also important when you see something like that, I think, when we've got the same aspect or an important aspect from both sides. So Venus is square, so natal Venus is conjunct the solar return ascendant, but the solar return Venus is square the natal ascendant. So that's the interaction between ascendants and Venuses on both sides, and they're pretty close as well. So that's just another thing to say.
It's great to have that aspect chart and to know how to see it on.
I can go without these ones. I mean, when I do a chart reading, this is something I even highlight in different colors, the aspects for myself, because things start popping out. And I can see, for example, that if this was the transit chart, that a person has lots of transits to a particular planet, but not that many to another. So obviously the theme of that planet becomes very important. Or just an example, but this is very handy, extremely.
I think just one last observation.
Yeah.
With this whole focus on Venus this year and having her on top of Jupiter, what rings for me is choosing abundance.
What do you mean choosing abundance?
It's just like understanding that you pull from an infinite source of wealth because you have a lot of inner resource. And just by giving that away, you're going to attract more of it into your life. Like this kind of shift in consciousness that helps you arrive to forgiving the world for stealing your art.
Exactly.
And I was even thinking about, it took me 10 years after I spent $10,000 to make my LP when I came back from Spain, to give that out. And then I was kind of in the Venus part of Taurus of just, wow, I spent all my resources all my life to make my music. And now that's all the people that are making them, so I had that reckoning is what I'm trying to say. But then, it feels it's the way to go, and I came to that same kind of conclusion that I am so blessed and so abundant. Like an old friend from college came by with his new girlfriend, and she is the producer for 4 PBS documentaries on constantly. She just ordered, she just ordered a chart for her friend for Christmas, and she just ordered 10 of my books. And it was like the abundance is that life is going to bring it to me, and I don't have to receive money the way I used to.
Absolutely. So you see that was such a journey of realizing what you meant to realize all the time. The sign that this whole thing is happening in is Pisces, just to reinforce the whole theme. And this first table, not the inter aspects, but this is actually the aspects in the solar return chart itself, is also very revealing. You have a sun conjunct moon here, which we already discussed, but also the nodes are squaring the sun by 0 degrees. And that's extremely important also. This is just, and the moon, of course, because they're conjunct. So the nodes are in square to the sun and the moon. And then many other things we may be able to spot here, but
wow, that would mean that this is really my destiny right now.
And also square Chiron. So the nodes are also square Chiron. Because, you've got this bunch of Chiron, sun and moon together, and the 3 of them are simultaneously squaring the nodes. So that one is really I think everybody would agree, every astrologer would say this is like a year of transitioning.
And it certainly has. I mean, you can look at the outside world, but it was uncanny to see one thing after another, that my website went down, the host went down, my concerts got canceled. I had to come up with this new part. And the thing is, I just love doing astrology. Like, I just love it. So I didn't even have the confidence that I could do it, and I just done it for all those years on the background, reading all my books and taking classes all the time. So it is a new beginning, and I do love what I'm in now.
Great. Well, you're on the right path, Lauren. Keep on.
Thank you.
Keep on.
Good. Thank you. I love this group.
Yes, we too. Guys, I suggest we have a quick break if you want. It's been 2 hours. And we can spend another one, look at more charts. But why don't we have a 5-minute break?
Okay.
All right. See you in 5. Who is next? which chart would you like to see? Volunteers?
I have to ask if Dwayne has also prepared something.
He said that he hadn't. I asked him just before you came.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, it's unusual, but we shouldn't exploit him, expecting every time to.
I don't. I just want to open the door.
I'm kidding.
And
Don't
Michael.
worry, I'm working on things behind the scenes.
Okay. And Michael had written that he had an interesting solar return with a grand trine, a mystic square, and so forth. I just read the chat while we were waiting.
Oh, yes, I saw that now. Michael, let's see your chart. I'm very curious. Do you want to?
Do you have my information?
I think I do.
Okay, I think all we need to do is just me give you the reference place, and that's it.
Yeah, let me just find you in my list here. And I think I got your details already entered.
It's pretty it's pretty impressive to look at it actually. But there's so much there, I don't know what to make of it all. The place of reference is Vernon, 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 Connecticut.
Okay, give me just a second, I'll open it up. I will share after it's ready because it's quicker this way.
I'm also using Placidus, which is, I think, pretty close to the Regimentatus, is it not?
That would be close to my one here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have to switch to Placidus as well, just for the sake of the example.
I think it's close enough where it'll still be relevant.
Okay, Vernon, Connecticut, here we are. Just switching to Placidus to.
And let's make sure that I'm correct, because I may be incorrect about all of that, but I think I think it's correct.
Okay, let's see. It does the same kind of distribution you're seeing on your side as well. This is the solar return chart. I'll take a look at the natal as well in a second, but let's look at that first on its own. Is that right, Michael? Is it all correct? The time, 3rd of September, 56, is that right?
That's all correct, yes.
1207?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so that must be the one. Venus on the ascendant in Cancer.
So which is the natal and which is the return on this
This is
chart?
only the return, Lauren. At the moment, we're looking at just at his solar return chart.
Yes.
And then,
Okay, thank you.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm looking at. It's just a return chart.
So there is a big square here because, you know, this year we've got that situation where the nodes in Sagittarius and Gemini are squaring Neptune. That's for everyone. And here, your Mercury in Virgo is completing the square. So we've got Virgo, Pisces, and then on top of everything else, the moon is with Neptune. So Neptune is together with the moon. It is opposite Virgo, Mercury. And then these two square the nodes, these two sides. So this is one whole configuration, which I think it's all connected. So what is really interesting to me is that Mercury, that is ruling Gemini, is in the house of Gemini. Then we've got the Neptunian moon plus, so Neptune plus moon in the 9th house, and the traditional ruler of the 9th house is Jupiter. So, and then connected back to Pisces. And then the nodes are in the same team. So the nodes are Sagittarius and Gemini. So this whole square is made of things that are interconnected energetically as well.
Indicating a bigger theme is what you're saying?
So the bigger theme is to me Gemini Sagittarius as a whole. Like we can call it third house, ninth house, we can call it Gemini Sagittarius, but everything to me revolves around education or knowledge or philosophy or whatever belief systems, the two sides of thinking. I don't know if you feel that this year is an exploratory year for you in one way or another.
Mhm.
This is just very quick. I mean, we normally would need more time to look properly. But just something that comes to mind.
Sure.
He mentioned the mystic rectangle that's there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also, you know, that everybody can see it right on, and that begins at the ascendant.
Oh, so not the mystic rectangle, but the grand cross.
No, I was
Well-
looking at the blue lines.
Oh, at the blue line. Oh, okay.
Right. Right. So those blue lines are reflective of the mystical triangle,
Yes.
but the grand square is made up of the nodes and the Mercury Moon opposition.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then the the T square is the Venus Saturn opposition with the Mars.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of those, and then there's the Grand Trine too, which is an Earth Grand Trine, is as well, I think. What with the let's see here, Uranus, Sun, and let's see,
Jupiter.
and Jupiter. Correct. Yes.
Yeah, actually, yes, it is there, even though it's not that, well, actually, yeah, it's close enough.
It's close enough.
It's close enough, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a lot of configurations in that chart. You've got almost everything.
Which is my point exactly, which is why I wanted to show it, because there's almost everything is in there.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, how does one even make sense of, is there a priority, or like you said, Radlina, to start off, is it all part of the same theme?
Well, now I think we need to do more investigating in order to go back.
You know what?
Yeah.
If this were my chart and I was looking at it, I would take a piece of paper and I would denote to myself all the blue lines on one half of the side of the paper, or you know, fill up one side, and on the other side I put all the red lines, and I would just look at it as these are the places of ease and flow, and these are the places I'm growing and changing and challenged by.
So I would suggest, rather than using a piece of paper, which may be more difficult just to achieve the same thing, why not use the table? And that's how
Yes, of course.
And this is the first one we're looking at. So this is the table of aspects in that particular chart. So as if this was your chart now, this year. Yeah, it is actually. And you see what stands out. For example, Mercury exactly sextile Venus is 0 degrees. So that would be important. Moon opposite Mercury, obviously. So here is how we can make the list more easily using this. And then if you recognize something repeating itself as an aspect or as a relationship between two planets that you have in your natal chart, then that would be activating a team in your life which is there anyway. And this year that team will be activated. So we need to look at the natal to make connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really curious in this chart about what Mercury is doing, because the more exact the aspect, of course, the more heavily it'll be felt. And he's trine Saturn within a 2 arc minute orb, and he squared the nodes within a 7 arc minute orb. So for me, this says a lot of Mercury activity in regards to like really creating a solid foundation for whatever it is you're supposed to be doing in your life right now. And I feel like it's going to come easily for you to just start building your mind around what your purpose is, how you're supposed to act, what are the steps you need to take. But I need to see actually the solar return chart because that's just from these aspects.
Okay, I'll switch to that in a second. Very good point. I just noticed something. I don't know if you guys think this is important, but for example, in the actual, so these are the aspects in the actual solar return. Now we've got Mercury sextile Venus exactly. And then if we look down here, we've got Mercury on the solar return is also exactly sextile the natal Venus.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, in other words, that you've got a Venus return this year. Exactly. So Venus must be at the same place in order to have the same aspect.
Right, and that's correct.
So let's see how that plays out. So let's mix them now. We're not very familiar with your birth chart, so that's what's making it a bit more difficult, but we'll see it.
When you've got it up there and you've got the horoscope for Michael, but the partner is you, wouldn't his partner be himself?
It doesn't matter who the partner is. This is just by default there because it's my setting.
Okay.
It only matters if we calculate composites and synastry. Otherwise, it only takes the details of the first person.
I always switch it, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's see. You've got Jupiter conjunct Sun by birth. Mercury in Libra. So, where is Venus? Yes, Venus return, exact Venus return. You see?
Right, so it's showing up in the 12th house on its return.
Yeah, but it's in the 8th house by birth.
Natal, yes.
Okay. And you also have something like, not yet, you would have it a bit later in the year, but the nodes are reversed. So this is also a special year for you because the actual nodes that we saw in the solar return chart and making a lot of aspects to your planets are reversed to your birth ones by sign and also by house, actually. Yeah, the south node you've got the south node in Gemini. And this year we've got the north node in Gemini.
I see what you're saying, yep.
So these years are also important for everyone from that perspective, you know, the nodal opposition. Okay, what else? The Mars in Pisces is activated.
Mm-hmm.
That's been for the last, since the beginning of the year, I think.
At least since your birthday. But actually everybody now that has natal Mars in Pisces for a longer period of time is really affected by Neptune on it. Even if, you know, by transit. You should be feeling a bit down in terms of your energy, I believe. It could be more depressive, it could be more just not acting that much, or it could be, you know, a feeling of delays, or rather.
Why would you say depressive? What's the indication of that?
The nature of Mars and Neptune is very different. Mars wants to act, wants to achieve, wants to move forwards and to be really kind of efficient in its action. When Neptune is on top of it, it slows it down. It kind of does prevent it from outer action, and it's more, it brings it inward. Yes, and especially when natal Mars is in Pisces in the first place, this Mars is not easily activated. It tends to be a little bit less energized because of the sign. It tends to need more rest and more meditation and things like that to come back to its strength. It's actually a very strong Mars, but it's not like a typical aggressive, how can I say, outward action.
Redlina, why do you say that it's a strong Mars? That's interesting. I never saw it that way.
Well, I just wanted to make a distinction that Mars in Pisces is not necessarily a weak Mars because it's in Pisces. That's what I wanted to say, actually. But I don't think it's an easy Mars in your case. It's retrograde, your birth one. That
Right.
only
It's on
10%.
IC.
Yeah, and only 10% of the population have Mars retrograde in general. And on top of that, it's in a sign that it doesn't feel very natural in. So it must be a challenging Mars in your particular chart. It's also singleton, as far as I can see.
It can be a passive aggressive Mars.
And it's opposite the sun. Is it opposite the sun, really? So
Widely, I think it's less than 10.
not exactly, yeah. So it's not actually, but it's still in a kind of opposition because they're in opposite. The two vital energies, especially when you are a man, and Mars and the Sun are the two male kind of proactive energies in us. Yours are counter to each other a bit,
Mhm.
and maybe the Sun wins because the Sun has Jupiter with it. It's very exaggerated. Well, Mars maybe a bit feeling awkward even. So there is a lot of passive aggression that could be accumulated in that Mars, or it could be a lot of action that it's not allowed to do or it's not possible to do. Could be many things, I don't know. Maybe you can tell us if you want what it is. But it's not an easy Mars, definitely.
No, it's not an easy Mars, and I've been trying to reconcile it, and one of the things that come to mind is perhaps that Mars is more representative of the peaceful warrior, and an attempt to assert myself more through peaceful means than more assertive aggressive means.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's a certain level of frustration, I think, too. That Mars and Pisces to me can sometimes mean, and I guess I'll speak for myself, is a level of frustration
Yeah,
in asserting myself.
I would imagine that there is a thing like that going on. And also, I know actually I happen to know a few men with Mars in Pisces, not retrograde, but in Pisces. And it's extremely sensitive also to helping the underdog, like being the kinds of battles I find these people are often involved in are those battles which, as you said, are not direct, but they are. You can become really active and really aggressive when you have to protect someone someone or something that's at the moment a victim.
Mhm.
It's got this savior attitude to it a bit.
I
So-
agree with that.
and very much jumping into the situation if there is a crisis or a problem that's witnessed, and you don't need to be personally involved with those people. That's the nature of Pisces. It goes and wants to help and save everyone, wants to save the world even. I don't know. I wonder, what do you do, Michael? Do you want to share with us?
Well, I was trained as a chiropractor, so I was a chiropractic doctor for 15 years, and then I transitioned into the nutritional field. So I was a product designer for a company that manufactured herbal supplements, vitamins, weight loss products. So I was involved in their research and development department for a number of years as well. So I've been in the healthcare industry for 25 years.
Seems like that ties in very well with your Virgo sun in the 10th house. You managed to find a progression which is very Virgo in its,
Yes.
symbols. And
Yes. But just at the beginning of the pandemic, I was let go from my job due to budget cuts. So I'm currently unemployed and have been using the time just to immerse myself in astrology. And unlike a lot of the people, I think that in the group, it seems like a lot of you folks have almost a lifetime love of astrology, and this came to me, relatively recently, within the last maybe 5 or 8 years, but the last certainly since the pandemic, but maybe 2 years, I've been studying it much more seriously. So this is something that I've been doing almost constantly for the last couple of years.
Mhm.
That's interesting. It's never too late, I think. But when you were saying that, Michael, I was thinking that Venus, the solar return Venus, it's not just returning by sign, but it's crossing the boundary of the ninth house right now. So
Yes.
it's birthday, basically, it was also crossing, and this becomes a significant planet because it's on the cusp. It's not on the cusp. It is actually. It's on the ascendant. In another way, it's on the cusp. But again, we have, I think, a prominent Venus. Has anyone calculated Michael's year? What year you are at?
The precession,
Yes,
I think it's fifth house.
house. So you are, how old were you at your last birthday, Michael?
I just turned 64 in September.
So 64 is what?
Yeah.
I'm not very good at math. So at 60, you've got the first house here. 61 second, 62 third, 64 fourth. Should be fourth.
Oh, fourth house?
Fourth house.
60.
And all this action in the fourth house here points back to that.
No, isn't it fifth house, Radlina? Because it's 60, I would be first.
Yes.
And then 61, I would be second.
Oh yes, 62 will be third, 63 will be fourth. Yeah, you're right. It's fifth house. So it's fifth house. And what's the lord of your fifth house?
So that would be
Mars.
Mars.
Okay, all roads lead to Mars.
Our friend Mars, yes.
So basically,
Say too, may I just say that, I think of Aquarius and the 12th house as, I know that 12th house is seen as Pisces, but anyways, as really interesting for astrology when you really get intrigued by it, or that is somehow Aquarius is. And I just see that you've got your Chiron in Aquarius, and you've got the part of fortune in Aquarius.
so this is the part of fortune of the solar return?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm saying that it would be a good time to study astrology.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least you're going to feel good about it.
Yeah, feel good about it. And it would help, if perhaps that Chiron in Aquarius, it would help whatever to philosophize or to be able to see whatever wounds that you carry.
Right. So why do you associate Chiron with astrology? Why necessarily Chiron?
No, I just meant the Chiron more in his personal life, that he kind of fell into astrology because he was cut off from his Virgo work in the health field, chiropractic, and then selling supplements and stuff like that. That, I don't know. It just occurred to me. That's all. Maybe
relevant. You mentioned about the job loss and everything. This may be connected to Sun in the second house here, in the solar return, possibly in terms of like having to now be self-sufficient, thinking of ways to not be tied into an organization or something like this. It's kind of there is a lot of independent work connected to the second house. I don't know if you have any thoughts of starting on your own or doing some sort of small business or whatever, still in the same field, but kind of now managing your own finances, second house, or managing your own, or maybe just using the year to reorganize finances and stuff like that.
Well, looking at the return chart, the second house cusp is in Leo, and even though the sun may not be in Leo, the return sun, it is in the second house.
Yes.
Radlina, you started off just a moment ago. You were starting to talk about Venus, but I'm not sure if you finished your thought.
No, Venus is very interesting here. I usually am very slow. I've got a Taurus ascendant, so I need more time to connect all the dots. But yes, the Venus standing out somehow because of the return. Like last year, I had both Mars and Venus returns, and this was very unusual, and I really felt it. So retrospectively, I can say that really was a much more energized and eventful year for me. And I think also because of these Venus-Mars returns. So you've got Venus return, which is exact, and also Venus crossing into the 9th house. Well, actually, your Venus is also crossing into the 9th house. It's on the cusp of the 9th house. So I think that's actually pulled into it, your birth one. So what aspects is Venus making? That's not very easy to see here. But okay, we have it in Cancer. So, oh, you've got both Mars and Venus in water. Are they in aspects to each other?
Well, with Saturn in the natal chart, it makes a grand trine.
Oh, yes, they are in aspect. So you've got a trine between Mars and Venus in the charts, in the natal.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's significant. We need to have that in the background of our mind, I think, in order to now try to interpret what it would mean for the Venus to come back or for Mars to receive an aspect by the solar return. So it seems like this would mean then that in the solar return, Venus is also trine the moon with Neptune, right?
Yes.
So, okay.
So, you know, Radlene, I'm wondering though that when you're doing,
we saw a grand trine when you first showed the showed it with its aspects.
Yes, and then this grand trine, now we can see, involves the natal Mars and Venus. Yeah, so that grand trine in the solar return is actually activating the Mars-Venus trine in the chart because it's conjuncting it. And is there another thing, the ascendant? So we've got another grand trine. The ascendant is at 23 Scorpio. So we are looking at around the 20-something degrees of the 3 water signs. And we've got the ascendant, Mars, and Venus. Yeah, okay, maybe we should do another, look at Michael's chart first.
Wait, can I add an interpretation?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I pressed the button, but I'll come back.
Okay. I need to look at it to be able to do so.
Yes, sure, sorry. Okay.
Okay. So just a few things that stand out in the beginning. And again, I see these repeating themes in your chart, Michael. So this is kind of interesting. Okay. So obviously the ruler of the year by perfections we determined is Aries based on his rulership over the 5th house cusp. So clearly there's going to be an importance placed on your hobbies, on your passions, on your love, on whatever your creativity and self-expression wants to do. With Mars being there near the final degree of Aries, what I really notice, like really stands out, is that Mars in your solar return chart is at the zenith. So he's at the highest point in the sky, which you can calculate by taking 270 degrees from the ascendant and seeing what planet is there. And so this is like Mars was directly above your head, more or less, you know, depending on your latitude. This tells me like a lot of taking action on the things that actually inspire you. And because Mars is also the ruler of your ascendant in your natal chart, for me, this is a lot of establishing your private identity and being able to assert it in the outer world. Because you have the Venus rising in Cancer in your solar return, to me, this says your creativity is rising, right? So again, there's this repeated theme of creation in your chart. Now, I find it interesting that you have Mercury in your solar making such an exact trine to your Saturn solar and also squaring both nodes. Am I losing you here or is it fine?
No,
we're good.
What we started with in the
Okay.
beginning. Remember that rectangle that we looked at. Actually, no, the square. The squares from both sides from the nodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, referring to, isn't it?
Because Mercury here in this chart is really strong, right? In the solar return, he's in the 3rd house, which he naturally rules over, and he's in Virgo, which he also rules over. So for me, Mercury's playing a big role in this chart. And the fact that he falls in your natal 10th, again, gives me this idea of creativity and changing direction in your career. And this is a lot about like getting specific about what kind of mindset you want to cultivate within yourself in order to be able to serve your purpose on the planet or whatever. So for me, there's a lot of internalization going on. Looking at the elements, I noticed that you're completely lacking air outside of the node and the part of fortune. So not really a year for a lot of communication and exchange. Most of this is, I'm seeing like really big earth pattern, right? So actually grounding ideas that have been inside you, focusing a bit on the material realm, the sun being in that solar return second is again about your resources, which is both your money, but it also has to do with like your talents, whatever your actual personal resources are, right? Your values, the thing that keep you attached to the earth. So for me, what I hear is like a career shift into doing something much more self-expressive and creative, and starting to think about exactly how you're going to transition in doing this new part of your life. So then that's just a few things that are quick. And then the last thing that just popped into my head as I'm looking at this, you know, this Mars is like activated in so many ways because the ruler of the solar return chart is the moon. And again, I see a 29-degree focus here, like in Lauren's chart. So for me, this is like you really are going to zero in on the Cancer archetype. And that's like what you were trying to cultivate within your private personal identity, is like to really take care of home, take care of business, like provide for your own safety, nurture. And it's like you really have to master this lesson. And where's the moon? She's on top of Mars together with Neptune. So again, this Neptune moon connection, it's so much about your imagination, about being creative, about tapping in to like the higher versions of yourself and utilizing this kind of dreamy and lazy and passive Mars, and like really tapping into what he can do when you're just going to the intuitive part rather than the thinking part. So I do also see a battle here between this moon Neptune in Pisces and then having that Mercury in Virgo in the solar return chart. So for me, it's like you really got to get practical this year and put into practice whatever you've been thinking of doing for yourself, and like just layering those inspirations into an actual structure that will help you build whatever it is you have imagined. And obviously for that we can look to the natal, but yeah, that's what I have for now.
Oh, great interpretations, Demo. I was thinking about Mars when you were speaking. Whether do you guys think that when Mars is retrograde, bad word, when it receives the Neptune aspect, for example, or something like this, what's going on now, maybe the opposite effect of actually being more proactive now than in a normal circumstance. It's kind of waking it up rather than slowing it down. So because it would make more sense in the context of the solar return with this Mars in the fifth in Aries and so on. Because I know the rule of thumb with Neptune on the Mars is don't do anything, kind of wait and see, strategize, prepare, but don't force any action because it probably won't work anyway. So you would need to kind of put up with passivity for a while. This will be the general interpretation of Neptune on the Mars. But because this Mars is retrograde and we see what's going on in the solar return, which is actually pointing out to a lot of different energy of Mars, this just makes me wonder, could that be the opposite effect then?
Well, yeah, because check out this also. You have the solar return Mars that is making an opposition to natal Neptune.
Oh, yes.
And so that theme is revisited in their relationship.
Yes, yes. So, well, this Mars is Neptunian to start with. It's in Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
So it obviously has a lot to work out around its nature in Pisces. What's the strong points? What's the weak points? It's kind of a revision year, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, especially because the moon is there and she's ruling the solar return chart.
Yes.
It's like this is the theme you got to focus your mind on. And
Yeah.
I don't know at what level you're experiencing Neptune in your life, Michael, but
Why
Yeah,
do
it
you
could give some
say that the moon is ruling the solar return chart? What gives you that?
The solar return ascendant is in Cancer.
Okay, okay, that's why. Okay, thank you.
But this moon is really inescapable. It's going to set the mood at these themes. You want it or not. So since your birthday, do you think it's been depressive or somehow emotional, or are you coming back to the past in some way, or do you think you can connect about Neptunian things going on?
Well, I think that it's all of the above. Mo, said some very interesting, striking things that I think are reflective of where I'm at. So, I mean, for all of us, we're in the throes of the pandemic. So right there, that's going to have some kind of an effect emotionally and psychologically on all of us. But right at the beginning, like I said before, I lost my job. So that then does put me in a situation where it could be reflective of what the planets are saying. In other words, this is an opportunity for me to get creative, to get clear, to think about what my next professional life is going to be like. And one thing that looking at this chart, there's a lot of cardinal energy too, so that kind of reinforces the energy behind a push forward. There's just so much cardinal energy here that it's really fueling, I think, what Emma was saying. I like to look at this as more of an opportunity than something to be either concerned or depressed, or I could say, "Woe is me! I lost my job. Nobody's hiring. We're in a pandemic. The economy's flat." Or more to Emma's point, that this is an opportunity to be creative and to reconcile some of these energies in a positive direction.
Absolutely. Maybe your Mars is waking up now, Michael, rather than the opposite. Maybe it was too passive in the past, kind of going with the flow, kind of very Neptunian way, going with the flow. But maybe now we'll be challenged.
Yes, because now that I think about it, that you say it, Radlina, my professional life has been very varied. That Jupiter Sun conjunct in the 10th, it's really been a lucky star for me, and in a absolutely huge way. That I don't know if it's made me I don't want to say the word lazy, but everything has happened at the exact time that I needed it to happen, and things from a professional perspective have been very fortuitous, and my wife has called me incredibly lucky. But that Mars from a 10th house perspective has never really needed to become engaged, if that's what you're saying. And now it may need to be.
Exactly. Maybe it wasn't that much causing trouble to the sun or the other way around. It's more like didn't have the opportunity, didn't have the reason to be stressed out, but in that positive way of being stressed out when you achieve with that, because you were pushed into a situation where you need to resolve something or you need to strive for something or whatever. Now you've got that situation, so it may be the best time to, I don't know, to embrace it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, this Mars is a singleton. Well, if we ignore Chiron, I don't ignore Chiron normally, but out of the standard 10 planets, this is a singleton planet, and it's always meant to be the one that expresses the essence of the others. So it's kind of consolidating everything else the others were about, and somehow finding a channel through the Mars to express it, in this case, through the Mars. So this Mars was not meant to stay like that, passive, all the time. You may be at that junction when it's now supposed to do what it's meant to do from the beginning.
Especially because it's on the IC of the natal. And so he had his easy fortune. Now the Mars from his natal that was not only in Pisces, but on the IC, it's been kind of tucked away and hidden.
Mm-hmm. One more reason.
And the Neptune on top of it, it's like, okay, you gotta start imagining something now. That gives you a, I don't know, that ninth house, there, you know, anyway, that's it's already just apparent, just to say that Mars in Pisces on the IC is going to be less pronounced. It's going to be, you'll feel it, but it'll be more private.
Extremely private, I would probably suppose it will be. One more way of being behind the scenes, in a way, with the Mars. But maybe now we can look at the forecast and the IC as what you've got from the base, yeah, what you've got from your core, from your roots, or from whatever you have been building, like a building block. So now this building block, oh well, that may be referred to what Emma said earlier about the Earth. You've got the Sun this year in an Earth house, and many other things like the South Node and North Node are in 2nd and 8th as well. So it may really be a time to start building up from the base of Mars, something like
Yes.
this.
Yes, that's and yeah, and what he had pointed out about the Mars, yeah, it seems to be moving in that direction, that to find a practical way to create something new.
Mm-hmm. So you see, we are together getting into some sort of a synthesis of the chart.
Yeah, oh, sorry, can I just say I've got Mars in Pisces, Neptune going over it, and I've just had the whole of my house redesigned. And lots of work, and I found my Mars is, I never know when to stop because it's got no boundaries.
In what house, Beryl?
Yeah.
Well, my Mars is in the 4th house.
Also, okay.
Yes. And it's had all its Neptune. It's waiting to come up to the Sun, which is also in Pisces, but it's gone over the Mercury and Mars. And I've done loads and loads of decorating.
So could it be, Michael, that you lost your job because you needed to pay more attention to your private life and your home, and maybe your family? And maybe now you have to get creative there and do something similar to Beryl.
Yeah.
That sounds very interesting to consider.
Have you been neglecting private life for public life and for work life? And is this now an opportunity to bring balance back into the picture?
You know, it's interesting because I feel almost fortunate that I have this opportunity. You know, luckily we're not suffering financially, so you know, I have an opportunity to just kind of go within and perhaps consider just what you're talking about.
All right. So it's very interesting, all this to me today.
You know, Radalina, shall we consider what we're going to, before we end, what we're going to do for next week, or do you already have something?
Lauren, today you're reading my mind. You're always like one step ahead. If I'm just about to say something.
I'm sorry.
Yes. I was just looking at the clock that we've got another 10 minutes. So yeah, I just wanted to see if anybody will add something more to this before.
Yeah, maybe I have something. Now I'm just stuck looking at this Mars in the natal chart, and because I really feel like this year for you, Michael, is really about this Mars and what he means for you. And, you know, in general, having Pisces on the IC suggests to me that your private experience of the world is this constant like acting out by blending in. So there has to be this like emotional blending into what the people around you are feeling. And there's this kind of like surrendering the self in the private experience in order to be kind of in flow with other people. So not really asserting yourself too much in different groups or in situations or whatever. And so that Mars being there is really being motivated to be a part of the whole song and not really display your individuality. And I feel like that's actually going to become stronger in this year because Neptune and the moon on top of that Mars, like adding this extreme watery feminine energy to this already very feminine and retrograde Mars is like how far are you willing to surrender your own direction to other people? Does that speak anything to you?
It does. It does. It does. I don't know if I have anything to add to that, Emma, but what you're saying definitely resonates, and it's thought provoking for sure.
Mhm.
Very good interpretations, by the way.
Indeed, I agree.
Thank you.
And you've just been doing this for how long, Emma?
Interpreting charts?
Yeah, well, yeah, just working with astrology. It sounded like you were a relative newbie. I think you said you were still a student, but that's could mean a variety of things. We're all students, I guess, for life in this regard.
But you've got a talent business right there going on. So,
Yeah, I started studying astrology about a year and a half ago, but I
Oh,
had like a spiritual awakening at one point, and then I started downloading a lot of information about the framework of astrology. So
oh,
I guess
you're
it's a memory more than a study for me.
remembering.
I really think that you have a very, very special talent that's really apparent and really coming forward in this group. It's really helpful.
Oh,
It's like you have and you also use the planets, the fixed stars. You use things like that as well, right?
well, I just you kind of just wade into whatever pool feels right in the moment. The fixed stars are really interesting. Harmonic astrology is really interesting. Vibrational astrology, so just whatever the day brings.
I actually was thinking for our next, I would love for us to examine some of the different fixed planets that are, and whether that's something that other people would like to look at.
Mm.
yeah, we just need to choose which ones because there's so many. Yeah, we can certainly do that at some point. And I just wanted to add that it's extremely rare to have this eye for synthesizing things from all sorts of places in the chart and at the same time being able to put it into words, like translate it.
Yes.
This is very rare. And usually it requires years of practice to get there. So
Emma, I agree. Emma has just been very able to verbalize amazing things. So I just am very, wow. Thank you.
Guys, thank you.
Yeah, thank you indeed.
From a past life or whatever.
yeah, look at the notes. Well, something is going on, but that needs to be investigated.
I do have the South Node in the 12th house conjunct Saturn, so that's.
Oh, you see, the
Pulling
scientist,
yeah.
the spiritual scientist aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah. All right. Well, that's why I mean, you see how much of a difference it makes when we go deeper into the things.
But Emma, how if you have this spiritual science and you've got the South Node in the 12th house, what gives you the ability to verbalize it? Do you have a strong third house or Gemini or what? What gives you the verbalization tech in your chart? What would give you that?
My chart ruler is in Gemini.
Okay.
And my Mercury is conjunct Regulus and opposite the moon at the last degree of Aquarius. That's what I think, but I don't know.
Mercury in Aquarius definitely helps in this
Yeah.
situation, I believe.
Yeah. Because it's as Radlina had said, it's one thing to know, and it's another thing to be able to verbalize and share what you know so other people can benefit. And that you must have that both of those.
I feel very seen and appreciated, and my heart is very open. Thank you.
No, it will be a shame not to practice. I don't know if you're interested in consultations and doing consultations for people and stuff like that. But if I'm you, I haven't seen your chart properly to give any advice. But from what I see, just briefly, I think you should give one-to-one advice.
Yeah, actually, I'll just plug this in because I don't think too many people are doing it, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
What I'm currently doing is using natal charts it's like self-awareness coaching. So basically, I'm working with people to find all their patterns and release, and just using the chart to help me understand what are the blind spots they're not seeing and then target with them with these questions. So yeah, I prefer the long-term work because I really like to develop intimate relationships with clients and not to do too many, so I can kind of control my schedule a bit more.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you.
Mm.
And I think that I would say those words could have come from me too. I help clients with self-awareness. That's what I want them to do, is see where their patterns are. I look at harmonics a lot.
By the way, Lauren, something you said earlier triggered me because I do all my work for donation. I never ask for money. And so I felt like I really understood what you were feeling when you were experiencing this thing of giving away your music. Like, I really get it. The power of just giving your talent and not asking for anything, and then it just comes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for, yes. And that's great. And Stephen, who is so, he had to leave us early, but he also doesn't charge for the charts or any of that. So he does his by, well, not even, I don't think he even does by donation. He does it just because he has he's at another stage of life.
Yes, we've had that conversation before, if you remember once, but it's a long story. There were pros and cons in all this, but maybe we can speak about it again. Because, yeah, we need to also somehow put boundaries and somehow put a price on it, not because of the, the money, but for other psychological reasons. But yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. So, all right, I really don't want to leave, but let's decide what we're doing next week.
Okay.
Approaching the end.
So you had mentioned fixed stars, but like you said, Radalina, that's a huge subject because there's so many of them. I think
there's six. There are six that are the there's Spica, Regulus. Actually, maybe Emma, you can help me in naming. There's six that are fixed, right?
No, they're much more than that. They just have signaled out those six to be, let's say, the most important for some reason.
Okay, but maybe we can start with those six that are the most important.
Well, I love the topic. I just am concerned about, I mean, we can have it at some point. I was just thinking, why don't we try to do more the, kind of the main bits of psychological astrology, the main topics before we start straying away to the more exotic ones that quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's so much we haven't covered yet. But at some point we can do that as well. Why not? I like it. Any other suggestions for, I mean, a list of suggestions for next times?
I have one, and you could even just put out feelers like for a couple topics and see what people vote. I think the moon is an interesting point. I'd like to
did that already.
More. Oh, you did that already?
We can always speak about it again. But so Emma, you joined us a little later, but we did all the archetypes. Like we had those 12 sessions of each one was like the moon, the fourth house, and Cancer, or the sun and Leo and the fifth house. So we had one discussion like this for each one. But we can always, we also did the lumination cycle. So I don't know if you're familiar with this side of astrology, but there is one discussion about the lumination cycle. Dwayne had a very interesting presentation there. And also we did, what else related to the moon? I think we did one more thing related to the moon, but anyway. And we have done Chiron, we have done aspects in astrology. What else? Okay, so just other topics, and if it's repeated, I'll tell you.
Well, when you talk about harmonics, what's that?
That's another a bit different kind of. So, okay, look, there is the traditional astrology techniques, and people that use them, they are revolving around harmonics, around prediction techniques, around fixed stars, and all those sorts of things. Well, in psychological astrology, it's more to do with the general archetypes, with many things, but it's okay, maybe we can do harmonics. I don't know too much about them.
I don't know enough about it to even say. I mean, I think of harmonics musically, and I think of harmonics as trines and squares and things like that. The way that.
Well, it's all about the sacred geometry that you're so interested in, Lauren. So you may be interested to go even further into that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's to me this is like a scientific expansion.
Is there some other thing about Dane Ridger that we could take an aspect and?
Oh, there's
look-
so many things I can't even. It's like my mind is blocked at the moment to figure out what I may suggest to you. There's so many things. Dwayne, something that comes to your mind? That
Well,
would-
when Rudyard comes up, I'm thinking I would like to have a discussion around the different, shall we say, levels of astrology. I mean, he lays it out in a way that indicates that specific astrological tools are suited to specific levels of astrology. So it's a matter of being clear on what sort of level are you working at? Are you working with, who are you working with? Is that person in an individuating stage in their life, or are they more embedded in the mass consciousness? You know, they have different issues, and it's really important to kind of locate where that person is.
Absolutely. Well, that's also to do with what Jeffrey Wolf Green is talking about. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeffrey Wolf Green's books. I'm sure they were somehow related. He was I think he was very influenced by Rudyard because, for example, he wrote the book about Uranus. I forgot the title, but his book about Uranus has the foreword by Rudyard's wife written. So anyway, that's a bit of a stray. But I was saying Jeffrey Wolf Green has in his book Pluto, the karmic astrology book, has those different levels of consciousness that people may be in. And it's very interesting to explore how that may require a different approach to astrology. I mean, different kinds of astrology may need to be used with those people. But ultimately, maybe it's about what kind of astrologer each one of us is. And then we kind of have these people that gravitate around us are the people that need us. And they gravitate around other astrologers that they need. And that's at least my way of thinking. I wouldn't adjust my astrology to the client. Rather, I would adjust the way I explain it based on the level I think they are at. But it will still be my kind of philosophy about it, the one that I've chosen, let's say. But yeah, that's a very philosophical topic, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah.
But Rudyard as a whole.
How about if we do a session on the current transits to the world right now and looking at also the Sabian symbols with them?
I recently did a talk on the nodal axis at the moment, Sagittarius Gemini, and how this translates into world events. So if you want, I can send it to you if you're interested in that. And then I also looked at this Neptune squaring the nodes and some other things. Politically, this is very interesting because maybe we can say that everything comes from the States as a team. So whatever happens in the States now is going to kind of begin a new wave of. I'm not that much into mundane astrology, to be honest, but I learned so much about this because of this talk. I don't know. If you want, we can do that. Current transit.
Well, I'm just throwing. I've just
We
been.
need to, maybe we need to make it more specific, Laura. But why don't we pick, for example, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction? This can be an interesting thing. Like in general, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions over time in history, and we have one this year, which is pretty important. It's not only a conjunction, but it's beginning a new cycle of 200 years. So
Maybe we can do some, yeah. And I don't, how can we tie that into, is the Saturn Jupiter conjunction? How can we personalize, both have it at the outside and the inside, and also include the Sabian symbols with it?
Okay, well, we can certainly take a look at the Sabian symbols of the important positions of the transiting slow planets at the moment. You know, they some of them move every now quickly, so they don't stay in the same degree to check the Sabian symbol. But maybe we can check the symbol. So 0 degrees Aquarius, that would be an interesting symbol to check where the conjunction happens. Or we can see where early in the year we had Pluto conjunct Saturn, for example, what degree that was. And those major conjunctions of the year 2020, there were a lot of them. So maybe we can make a list of, I think there were 4 or 5 major conjunctions and
Well,
explore.
certainly we're coming up to that Saturn Jupiter one, correct?
Yeah.
Is it November or
22nd of December, on the winter solstice exactly.
maybe we could look at that just that time and do a
Yeah.
chart.
I think that's a good idea actually. If we want to choose the topic of Saturn Jupiter conjunctions and the current one.
Okay.
Yeah, because so many other things tie into it. So when we look at what we'll be looking at will be the chart of now, or the chart of the 22nd of December.
And how we can personalize it is to take that Saturn Jupiter conjunction on the December 22nd and look at our individual charts to just see if there are any specific aspects to us personally.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
I love it.
Yay, we have some sort of synthesis of us.
Yes. I also love how at the end of every meeting we choose, like somehow with the consensus, we choose what we're doing next time, and it's never an argument. Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say the graphics you've been coming up with to portray each week are fabulous.
Oh, thank you. They're just random photos from the internet. But I try to choose something that is at least vaguely relevant to what we'll be talking about, or beautiful just in general.
They really work well.
You have an artist's eye, Radlina.
Well, Venus is the ruler of the chart. I guess it's got something to do with it. Yeah.
Could I just address Michael? Michael, just to rewind back to the point in the discussion where we were all looking at this chart with the mystic rectangle, the trine, and so on, and you were saying, you know, how does one approach all of this? And I would recommend, if I was in the same place, I'd be looking to the Sabian symbols right off the bat to get an overall symbolic view through that window. It's always proven, in my experience, to be really revelatory, and it picks up on themes that you might not necessarily encounter through other means. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Sabians or not, or.
I am familiar with them. I don't use them very much, but I am familiar with them. I guess what I was going to ask you, Dwayne, is that because that chart still is so busy and there are so many different aspects and relationships and planets, that's still going to end up being a lot of Sabian symbols to kind of go through and to synthesize. In other words, coming up with some kind of coherent theme.
So they will do it for you, Michael. I do, for every chart I do, I go through the entire chart, no matter how many there are of every, and I write by hand because it's something that in my brain that makes me understand it all better. But I'm amazed when I look at the Sabian symbols of a certain thing in a chart and how they do coordinate and they do have themes and even it takes me an hour before I talk to a client and I've already done all the other points. Then I do all the Sabian symbols and then I just read them to the client and they overlap and they create a picture that's amazing. So it does
do a lot of information. Yes, but also I agree with both of them, Michael. It's extremely rare. I think maybe don't check everything because it really can get more confusing at the end than helpful. But I would check, for example, based on what we discovered today about your chart, pick the Mars and the Venus, for example, and the Mercury. You've got like several main themes in your chart right now. So if you check those, especially the Mars, then things will start appearing as the Sabian symbols often reveal what this is really all about. Yeah. Yeah,
well, that actually makes more sense. Is pick those things that are really sticking out and that are just highly relevant in a particular chart, and just start with those. So perhaps the Mars, Mercury, and Venus, like you said, would be a good place to start.
That's what
makes sense of that.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Okay, I appreciate that, Wayne. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the best source for Sabian symbols.
Is
But
that the Rugier website?
no, it's not the Rugier website. It's another
Oh.
website. But if you
Which one
search
is it?
Google, I just typed Rugier and Sabian symbols, and this
Oh.
website minds something. It's called the majority of the book of Day. So it's this mindfire.ca. And when you open that, it gives you access to the descriptions of all the symbols by Rugier. It's not the whole book there, but at least what we're interested in. The astrological mandala. And then if you want it to be a little easier in terms of explanations and kind of more modernized everyday description, then this one is pretty good as well, and the James Burgess, but we had a session especially on the Sabian symbols. You can go back to it if you want. There are more sources there.
Yep.
Okay, well, we have a plan for next week. It's time to
Thank
say
you.
goodbye.
Thank you for leading us and helping us learn together.
It was a pleasure. I will be waiting for all of you next time.
I know, it's so fun. I'm second, and a year ago, I didn't even know this would be in my life. And now it's such a highlight.
That's great. It makes me very happy.
Mhm.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.